Well, have you ever gone bowling with a little kid? I mean, you know, kids who can sometimes barely roll the ball, and it almost always ends up in the gutter. And then sometimes the kid gets frustrated, really frustrated because he's not knocking down any pins. But then you put out the bumpers. You've seen the bumpers, right? They block the gutters. And so the ball is kept from going into the gutter. It's kept in the lane, and it goes down and it hits the pins. And now the kid is having fun. I mean, he may even get a better score than some of the adults who are playing without the bumpers. But those bumpers make it so you can't fail. And I've seen the bowling ball sometimes zig down the lane. Back and forth between bumper to bumper. It would have been gutter, 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 gutter. No, it went back and forth down the lane, all the way down, bouncing off the bumpers. It would have been a gutter within 3 feet, but it went all the way down and hit some pins. When you can't fail, it changes everything. Now let me take that idea and apply it to life. We don't know what will happen today, or tomorrow, or next week, or next month, or next year, or so on. And in life, we experience good things and blessings, but we also experience hardships and troubles. But as believers in Jesus, as children of God, we know how it all ends. And that changes everything. We know that God is in control. And so if God is in control, how does that affect the way that you live? How does that affect your perspective in life? How does it affect your future? Knowing God is in control gives us the ability to live well now. Knowing that He can't fail, that He is victorious, and that He has you in His hand, that changes everything. Today we are going to see Daniel's final prophetic vision. Now, by now, as we stand here today in our time, part of this vision, this prophecy, has already been fulfilled. And it has some it is amazingly accurate. The details that God gives in these visions to Daniel are very accurate. And we can now look back in history and see how that played out in history. And then there's still some more to yet be fulfilled. But you know the thing, it doesn't tell us everything, but it is clear that God knows what He's doing. And God knows what He's talking about. And God is in control. But the vision comes because Daniel has a question. And he's waiting for an answer. So let's begin in Daniel chapter 10 and verse 1. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the word was true, and it was a great conflict. And he understood that the word, he understood the word and had understanding of the vision. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all for the full 3 weeks. So this is sometime around the time period when Daniel was put in the lion's den. So it's somewhat around that time period. And so Daniel has this vision, and it's generally described this way. It's true, and it was great conflict. So then he explains what's going on when Daniel had this vision. He had been in mourning for 3 weeks. So he's not eating any delicious or delicacies or meat or wine. This probably means he's not eating any of those choice foods that are available to him from the king or the king's table. He also didn't anoint himself, which suggests that he's not doing his normal personal care routine. He's letting himself go, so to speak, because he's in mourning. And this mourning is an expression of his humbly and sincerely and intensely seeking God. You see, Daniel has a question, and he's asking God for the answer. Now, this is made clear for us later in verse 12 that he's been asking a question and God's giving him an answer. But we're never told exactly what his question is. But from the vision that he is given, he's likely asking about the future of Israel. So let's keep reading, verse 4. On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the Tigris River, of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves. So I was left alone and saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in deep sleep with my face to the ground. And behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. So Daniel is, at this point, is physically standing next to the Tigris River where he has this vision. And there are other people with him, but only Daniel sees the vision. The others somehow recognized or sensed the supernatural presence, and they were afraid and ran away and hid. But Daniel looks up and sees an angel. And this is most likely Gabriel, again, who, as in the previous visions. But when Daniel sees this vision, he loses all his strength and he turns pale. And when he hears the angel speak, he falls into a deep sleep, kind of like being in a trance, until the angel gives him strength and stands him up. Okay, let's keep reading. Verse 12. Then he said to me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia, and came to make you understand what is happening to your people in the latter days. For the vision is for days yet to come. So the angel encourages Daniel and tells him that he has nothing to be afraid of, that God has heard his prayer. And God immediately responded and sent the angel with the answer. But then the angel says something that's a little surprising. He was delayed in coming to Daniel by the prince of Persia. Now, this person, this prince of Persia, kept him away. Now, we have to stop here for a minute and talk about this, because this chapter always raises the question, who is the prince of Persia? And who is the prince of Greece, who's mentioned later in verse 12? In fact, we answered this question a couple years ago in our question and answer time. But who they are is not directly explained here in the passage. But from context, we understand that they are powerful demons, fallen angels. But how do we come to that conclusion? Well, first of all, we conclude that they are demons because they are in conflict with God's angels, and who are spiritual beings, spirit beings. And so these are also spirit beings, spiritual beings, but they are obviously opposed to God and his angels. And we conclude that they are powerful because they were able to hinder or slow the progress of one of the angels, and he needed Michael's help. And so this is an instance of spiritual warfare between God's angels and demons or fallen angels who are trying to stop God's message from getting to Daniel. Now there's more we could go into this, but we don't really have time because we want to deal with the prophecy. And so you can ask me later. So angels, this angel was delayed for 21 days or 3 weeks. That's the time period that Daniel has been praying and mourning, seeking an answer and waiting for an answer. We're not told why the fallen angels are fighting against God's holy angels here, but it appears that the demons don't want Daniel to get this message from God. Maybe it's because the message implies those fallen angels, their eventual defeat in the future. But let's keep reading. Verse 15. When he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face towards the ground and was mute. And behold, one in the likeness of the children of man touched my lips. In other words, someone who looked like a human. Then I opened my mouth and spoke. I said to him who stood before me, O my Lord, by reason of the vision, pains have come upon me, and I retain no strength. How can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord? For now no strength remains in me, and no breath is left in me. Again, one having the appearance of a man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, O man greatly loved, fear not, peace be with you, be strong and be of good courage. And as he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, let the Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. So Daniel is overwhelmed by the vision again, and he can't speak until Gabriel gives him the ability to speak. And Daniel then admits his weakness and again is given strength. And he is encouraged by the angel. Now, once Daniel has the strength, he's ready to hear the message, to receive the message, and he asks the angel to tell him. Verse 20. Then he said, do you know why I have come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia, and when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is none who contends by my side except against these except Michael, your prince. So Gabriel, the angel, first asks a rhetorical question. Do you know why I've come? It's kind of like saying, you know why I'm here, right? But then he's drawing attention back to the important message, but then he immediately says that he's about to leave again in order to go continue fighting the prince of Persia. And the prince of Greece is going to come too. Then he gets back to the message, and it's about God's plan for what will happen in the world. He references the book of truth. I'm going to tell you everything that's in the book of truth. Well, the book of truth refers to what God has decreed will happen. And so the fallen angels are fighting against God and his decree, but they will fail. And Gabriel then adds that only Michael, your prince, has helped him in this fight. Now, calling Michael your prince, Michael the angel, your prince, suggests that Michael was assigned to watching over Israel. And the fact that only Michael helped him in this fight is not saying that Michael was the only angel available or the only one willing to come help in the fight. Michael is all that was needed. So when Michael came, Gabriel was able to leave and come to Daniel. Chapter 11, verse 1 says, and as for me in the first year, this angel still speaking, as for me in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. Now this verse actually belongs with the previous section. Gabriel is still talking about the spiritual battle between the holy and fallen angels. But specifically here, he's talking about an incident that happened a couple years ago. So just as Michael had come to Gabriel's aid right now, Gabriel had helped Michael earlier. And the timing of that help, when Gabriel helped Michael, the timing suggests the earlier conflict may have been over the Persians conquering Babylon, or it could have been the safety of the Jews during that time while the Persians were conquering Babylon. Or it could have been over the decree that was made by Cyrus that allowed the Jews to return to the land. But that's the timing of that, what the angel's talking about here. But these last verses, they express urgency. There's a spiritual battle going on over the direction of human history. At the same time, these verses express that there is no reason to worry, because God's angels will be victorious. God is in control. And now Daniel is given a vision of the future. Chapter 11, verse 2. And now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia, and a 4th shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to the authority with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. And so he starts by saying that there will be 4 more Persian kings, but that the 4th one will be a lot richer than the ones before him. And so this wealthier king then will start fighting against the Greeks. Now, there were actually 12 Persian kings after Cyrus. And so the prophecy, though, is focusing on 4 of those 12. Probably 4 significant kings. Now, a new king then will rise up and be strong. This is talking about Alexander the Great. And Alexander quickly conquered much of the world. But his rule was short-lived because he died young. And his kingdom was then divided by his 4 generals. And none of those 4 kingdoms that were divided out of his, none of those 4 kingdoms were as strong or as prosperous as Alexander's was. But 2 of them were stronger than the other 2. Now, much of the rest of the prophecy here is going to talk about these 2 kingdoms, 2 that are more stronger, bad English, but you know what I mean, that are stronger. They are called the king of the south and the king of the north. Now, Syria is in the north, and it was ruled, talking historically from our perspective now, it was ruled by the Seleucid kings. All of these kings had the dynastic name or title of Seleucus or Antiochus. Okay? Now, Egypt is in the south, and it was ruled by the Ptolemaic kings. All of these kings have the dynastic name of Ptolemy. And a significant thing to note is this. What or who is in the middle between these 2 kingdoms, between Syria and Egypt? Jerusalem and the Jews. These kingdoms will fight for control of this entire region. And so everything they do will affect Israel. And so this is how this prophecy played out in history. Ptolemy the First, down in Egypt, was strong. Seleucus the First had been forced out of his kingdom in the north and became one of Ptolemy's generals. He was called a prince here in the passage, but he's one of Ptolemy's generals in verse 5. But Seleucus became stronger and went and retook his territory up in Syria. And then he was more powerful than Ptolemy was down in the south. Let's keep reading, verse 6. Chapter 11, verse 6. after some years, they shall make an alliance. So the two of them. After some years, they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure. But she shall be given up, and her attendants, he who fathered her, and he who supported her in those times. And from a branch from her roots, one shall arise in his place. He shall come against the army and enter the fortress of the kings of the north, and he shall deal with them and shall prevail. He shall also carry off to Egypt their gods and with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold. And for some years he shall refrain from attacking the king of the north. Then the latter shall come into the realm of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. His sons shall wage war and assemble a multitude of great forces, which shall keep coming and overflow and pass through, and again shall carry the war as far as his fortress. Then the king of the south, moved with rage, shall come out and fight against the king of the north, and he shall raise a great multitude, but it shall be given into his hand. And when the multitude is taken away, his heart shall be exalted, and he shall cast down tens of thousands, but he shall not prevail. Let me tell you how this happened. So a number of years later, Ptolemy II in the south and Antiochus II up in the north formed an alliance. As part of their alliance, Ptolemy gave his daughter Bernice to Antiochus as a wife. Antiochus was already married, but he divorced his first wife and married Bernice. And when he divorced his first wife, he also disowned his two sons or children through her. But later, he remarried his first wife, and she came and murdered Bernice and her child. So then Bernice's brother, Ptolemy III, down in Egypt, became king of Egypt. And he's who is referred to as the branch from her roots in verse 7. And you can see how it said that she would not retain her strength, the strength of her arm. She was killed. Okay, and her children. And so he is a relative, Ptolemy is a relative of Bernice. Then he invaded Syria and took a lot of their stuff, including some of the Egyptian idols that had been taken from Egypt at an earlier time. And then he went home to Egypt. Later, Seleucus II went down from Syria to fight against Ptolemy. But he failed. And it appears that he didn't even make it down, from history, that he didn't even make it down to Egypt before returning home. But later, his sons, Seleucus III and Antiochus III, they continue the fighting with Egypt. And Antiochus went down as far as Ptolemy IV's fortress. And he fought against Ptolemy. But he failed. And it appears that I'm getting back in my history here. So he went down, where am I? Antiochus went down as far as Ptolemy's fortress, but Ptolemy raised up a huge army and defeated Antiochus. In fact, Ptolemy killed thousands upon thousands of soldiers from the north. And he became arrogant because of his great victory. But his dominance didn't last. Let's keep reading, verse 13. For the king of the north shall again raise a multitude greater than the first, and after some years he shall come on with a great army and abundant supplies. In those times, many shall rise against the king of the south, and the violent among your own people, remember he's talking to Daniel here, violent among your own people, some of the Jews, shall lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they shall fail. Then the king of the north shall come and throw up siege works and take a well-fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not stand, or even his best troops, for there shall be no strength to stand. But he who comes against him shall do as he wills, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his hand. He shall set his face to come with the strength of his whole kingdom, and he shall bring terms of an agreement and perform them. He shall give him the daughter of a woman to destroy the kingdom. but it shall not stand or be to his advantage. Afterward he shall turn his face to the coastlands and shall capture many of them, but a commander shall put an end to his insolence. Indeed, he shall turn his insolence back upon him. Then he shall turn his face back toward the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and shall not be found. So Antiochus III eventually became stronger, and he took advantage of some unrest down in Egypt when Ptolemy IV died and his son was being made king, and so he wasn't very strong yet. Antiochus came down into Palestine, the area around Israel, in order to take it. Now some of the Jews tried to stand against him, but they weren't able to. So Antiochus took all of the land between Syria and Egypt, including Israel. Then Antiochus made a treaty with Egypt, and he gave his daughter, you might know this name, Cleopatra, as a wife to Ptolemy V. Now Antiochus hoped that his daughter, Cleopatra, would help him take over Egypt and help him take over that king. But she loved her husband, and she sided with him. Now, on his way back home, Antiochus took some land along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, including some Greek land. But this got him in trouble because he was repelled by the Romans. And he was made a subject of Rome at that point, and he had to pay tribute to Rome. And in order to pay tribute, he tried to rob a temple in his own country to have money to pay. But some people revolted and killed him. Verse 20. Then shall arise in his place one who shall send an exactor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom. But within a few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. So Antiochus III was replaced by Seleucus IV, who sent a tax collector down to Jerusalem in order to rob the temple to have money to pay the tribute to the Romans. And it appears he wasn't able to take anything from the temple. But later this tax collector eventually returned home to Syria, and he assassinated Seleucus. And so Seleucus' reign was short. Verse 21. In his place shall arise a contemptible person whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. And from the time that an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, and he shall become strong with a small people. Without warning, he shall come into the richest parts of the province, and he shall do what neither his father nor his father's fathers have done, scattering among them plunder, spoil, and goods. He shall devise plans against strongholds, but only for a time. And he shall stir up his power and his heart against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall wage war in an exceedingly great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for plots shall be devised against him. Even those who eat his food shall break him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. So Seleucus IV was replaced by Antiochus IV, or who we know as Antiochus Epiphanes. He wasn't the rightful heir to the throne, but he took it anyways. The rightful heir was actually being held as a hostage by Rome ever since his father had been defeated by Rome. So Antiochus was the younger brother, but he manipulated his way into power, to the throne. And he was not a good person. In fact, here he's called a contemptible person. He was shameless and ruthless and violent, and he thought of himself as a god. And when Ptolemy VI started trying to take back some land in Palestine that Antiochus III had taken, well, Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, attacked the lands all around Israel and seized control of them. And at that time, he removed the high priest in Jerusalem, and he replaced him with another man who had paid Antiochus a bribe and promised to be loyal to him. Then Antiochus went down to attack Egypt. And both kings, in the north and the south, had huge armies, but Ptolemy in the south was weakened by bad advice and sedition within his own ranks. And when the armies fought, Egypt lost, and Ptolemy was taken prisoner by Antiochus. Verse 27. As for the two kings, their hearts shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same table, but to no avail. For the end is yet to be at the time appointed. And he shall return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant. And he shall work his will and return to his own land. So while Ptolemy was a prisoner, his brother, he was a prisoner of Antiochus up in the north. His brother was made king down in Egypt. And so Ptolemy and Antiochus, they schemed together. They ate at the same table together, and they schemed together to retake the throne of Egypt. Now, they both made promises to each other that neither one of them planned to keep. They lied to each other. And so when they went on their trip down to Egypt, they had some success, but not complete success. Again, because God's in control. But on his way home, Antiochus traveled through Israel, and he found an insurrection in progress. And he stopped the uprising and killed many thousands of men, women, and children. And he robbed the temple in Jerusalem. And it says he was set against the Holy Covenant, which means he was opposed to God and to his people. And then he went home. Verse 29. At the time appointed, he shall return and come into the south, but it shall not be this time as it was before. For ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw, and shall turn back and be enraged and take action against the Holy Covenant. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the Holy Covenant. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering. And they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant. But the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. And the wise among the people shall make many understand, though for some days they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plunder. When they stumble, they shall receive a little help, and many shall join themselves to them with flattery, and some of the wise shall stumble, so that they may be refined, purified, and made white until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. So later, at a time that God had appointed, Antiochus returned to the south, towards the south again, to fight against Egypt. But this time he was not successful because Rome was there. And they had come to Egypt's aid. Ptolemy had asked for help, and Rome came on ships and were there. And so Antiochus then headed towards home, but he was angry. And when he got to Jerusalem, he took out all his frustrations on Jerusalem and on the Israelites there. And so there were some in Israel who had forsaken the Holy Covenant, and those allied themselves with Antiochus. But there were also some who are called the wise here in the passage. They remained faithful to God, and they led God's people in being faithful and standing against Antiochus. And so he attacked the people, and he opposed the worship of God, and he stopped the sacrifices, and he desecrated the temple. And many in Israel were killed or taken captive as slaves or had their property taken. They suffered under his heavy hand. But they also understood, the wise, they also understood that this suffering served as a means of purification, of purifying them as individuals, and purifying Israel as a whole. Because it was discipline to cleanse them from sinful ways, and it demonstrated who in Israel were true believers and who were not. But notice the statement at the end of verse 35. It says, until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. In other words, God had set a time for this trouble and a time for it to end. This statement would have encouraged those Jews living at that time to endure through suffering because they knew that God's in control and that the suffering would come to an end. And the Jews eventually defeated Antiochus, and he later died. But in the next paragraph, the prophecy appears to go back and discuss some of the sinful and arrogant and anti-God behavior of Antiochus Epiphanes. At the same time, the descriptions appear to be hyperbolic or to go beyond the scope of Antiochus's actual actions. Starting in verse 36, there's this shift from the historical time between the reigns of Cyrus and Antiochus to the future time of the Antichrist. We've already seen how Antiochus is a type of the Antichrist, or a foreshadowing of the Antichrist. And this is what we see here too. Antiochus did terrible things, and the Antichrist will be like him, but worse. And so as we look back at the actions of Antiochus, he functions as a picture of the future Antichrist. And this part of the prophecy is fulfilled in part by Antiochus, but ultimately fulfilled by the Antichrist. And the two are presented here almost blended together in verses 36 through 39. But in verses 40 to 45, the actions are clearly not about historical Antiochus, but they look ahead to the Antichrist. And so the prophecy goes from speaking specifically of Antiochus to speaking of Antiochus as a type of the Antichrist to speaking specifically of the Antichrist. All right, so let's keep reading. Verse 36. And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished. For what is decreed shall be done. And he shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these. A God whom his fathers did not know, he shall honor, and with gold and silver, and with precious stones and costly gifts. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. Those who acknowledge him, he shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many, and shall divide the land for a price. So, like Antiochus, the Antichrist will do whatever he wants. And he will think that he is greater than any god, and he will say unbelievable and offensive things against the one true God. So it's not that he is unreligious, but he appears to use religion for his own benefits. He's not faithful, but he will worship the gods who help him. He will be against the true God, and he will hold himself up as a god. And people will actually be impressed by him and will follow him. And he will give honor to those who get behind him and support him and commit to him. And it also appears he'll be accepting bribes. That will be the way to get ahead. Pay him off. And it will be a time of indignation or wrath. And so it will be a terrible time. This is talking about the time of the Great Tribulation, during which God will pour out his wrath and judgment on the world. But this time will come to an end. The Antichrist will be successful for a time, but the end is decreed by God. Verse 40. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen and with many ships. And he shall come into countries and shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land, or Israel, Jerusalem, and tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand, Edom and Moab and the main part of the Ammonites. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and of silver and all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Cushites shall follow in his train. But news from the east and the north shall alarm him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. He shall pitch his palatial tents between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. So at this point, the shift to the future times is made clear with the phrase, at the time of the end, and the fact that none of these things actually happened in the life of Antiochus. The king of the north most likely refers to the Antichrist here. And so some king or coalition from the south will attack him, but he will quickly and mightily counterattack, and he will easily win and take over the entire area. And like in the earlier part of the prophecy, we again see a battle between the north and the south, with Israel caught in the middle. Everything seems to center around Israel. That is, around God's land and God's people. It's interesting, though, he says that Edom and Moab and most of the Ammonites were not trampled by the Antichrist. This may suggest that they will ally themselves with the Antichrist against Israel, or it may just be that simply that they are not in his path of destruction. But other countries to the south will fall victim to this attack as well. And he ends up ruling the entire land from north to south. But then he will hear about some opposition near home, and he will quickly go up and squash it in his anger. It sounds as if he takes it as a personal insult that anyone would dare oppose him. But then he takes up his residence in Jerusalem, which is between the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea and Mount Zion. He will set himself up on God's holy mountain. But his end will come. God has declared it. And the final battle will take place there in Israel. And no one will be able to help the Antichrist when God brings him and his rule to an end. Look at chapter 12, verse 1. At that time shall arise Michael the great prince, who has charge over your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. So during the Antichrist's reign of terror, Michael the archangel will be active in supporting God's people. They will go through the worst of times. In fact, they will experience severe trouble that is worse than anything the nation of Israel has ever experienced before. That's saying something. But it won't last forever. And everyone whose name is written in God's book, in other words, those who believe in him, those who are his holy people, they will be delivered. Verse 2. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Now, this is an amazing, direct statement about resurrection. It's the most explicit statement about resurrection in the Old Testament. There are other references that hint at it or allude to resurrection, but this says it plainly. People who have died, slept in the earth, people who have died will be raised. And some will have everlasting life. Some of those who are raised will have everlasting life. And others will have everlasting contempt or reproach or disgrace. In other words, the unbelievers will experience shame and disgust because they have rejected God and chosen sin. And these states, both life and contempt, will last forever. There will be eternal life for those who believe and eternal punishment for those who don't. Verse 3. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. So the wise, again, are those who believe in and worship God. They are spiritually wise because they recognize God for who He is and they hold to Him in faith. They are His holy people and they live holy lives as they follow God. They tell others about God and they lead people to God. The wise here are compared to bright lights like the sun and the stars. They shine, they stand out, they're different, and they are exalted by God. They are God's people. And in this we see there is clearly a good ending and a bad ending. And you want to be one of God's people. And God has made a way for you to be reconciled to Him and to be His. He sent Jesus to pay for our sin so we could be forgiven and made His children. And God's word is very clear. Believe in Jesus and be saved. Believe in Jesus and become a child of God. This is the only way to have eternal life and the only way to live in right relationship with God. Verse 4. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. This brings the prophecy to an end. Gabriel tells Daniel to seal it and seal it for safekeeping. And this will be an encouragement to people at the right time. Now, ironically, this didn't answer all the questions. So now what? Look at verse 5. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others stood, one on this bank of the stream, and one on that bank of the stream. And someone said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the stream, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the stream. He raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven and swore by Him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. And that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. So now we're back at the scene where it all started. At the beginning of the vision. And Daniel sees three heavenly beings. It appears to be two angels, including Gabriel, and then God. The image of the man dressed in linen above the waters is similar to the one earlier that represented God in chapter 9. So one of the angels asks God, how long will this trouble or this oppression last before God brings it to an end? And God answers with an oath. He raises not just his right hand, but both hands, which seems to emphasize the truthfulness of this statement. And he swears by himself, by Him who lives forever, in words, by God. And he says it will last 3.5 years. Verse 8. I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, "Oh, my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things?" He said, "Go your way, Daniel. For the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1,335 days. But go your way till the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of days." So Daniel wants to know more. He has questions that haven't been answered. He doesn't understand it all. He wants to know what the final results of all this will be. But God doesn't tell him. Daniel is told to go his way. And what will happen will happen. It's all been set. God has said it. And it will play out in the end times. So Daniel is basically told to mind his own business. To not worry about it. And to go on with life. In the meantime, he's told that the wicked will continue to be wicked. And they won't understand the truth. But many others will be purified and made holy. The spiritually wise will understand the truth. They will understand that God is in control. And no matter how bad things may get, God will have the victory. And God's people will be refined through it. And then he adds another detail about the timing. The sacrificial offerings will be stopped, and they'll see the abomination of desolation, the thing that desecrates God's temple, the Antichrist setting himself up as God. And from that time, there will be 1,290 days. But then he also mentions that those who make it to day 1,335 will be blessed. And these numbers are difficult to understand exactly, but both of them come out to around 3.5 years. We don't know what exactly they represent. Some have suggested, well, some people think they know exactly what it means, but there are suggestions. But some have suggested that the later date is the official inauguration of Christ's millennial kingdom. But we can't be sure. But it's clear that there is an end to tribulation. And that end is set by God. And it's clear that there is blessing coming to God's people. Just like Daniel, we are left with some unanswered questions. Then God again tells Daniel, go your way till the end. But then he adds some reassurance of his promise to be faithful. His promise to those who are faithful. Daniel, like the rest of God's people, the wise, the true believers who live in relationship with God, they will all be resurrected in the end. And they will have rest. And they will have their place in God's kingdom. Daniel will have everlasting life. And he doesn't need to worry. He can have complete confidence in God. So let me wrap this up with this. Prophecy was not given so that we could know every detail of the future. It was given so that it wasn't given so that we can obsess over all the details or spend all our time trying to figure out, is this guy the Antichrist? Is this guy the Antichrist? And we shouldn't be afraid about the future. Even if we read prophecies that sound scary. We shouldn't be afraid about the future unless you don't have a relationship with God. If you don't have a relationship with God, then you have reason to be afraid. And this should motivate you to seek God. Prophecy confirms that God has a plan and God is in control. It encourages us and gives us confidence to live in the world now, knowing that God's plan will be accomplished. And even in the midst of suffering, we can have peace and confidence and security. Trials and tribulations will come to an end. God will have the victory, and his people will be with him forever. And knowing this, you can go your way. You can look ahead to the future, but not obsess over what will happen tomorrow. You can go about your business and live life and be faithful to God and be holy and trust him. God's in control. So live your life and live it for him.